Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into something truly incredible. We're going on a journey back in time to medieval India to see how the languages that over 1 billion people speak today were actually born. It's a fantastic story of poetry, power, and some amazing cultural mixing.
So, just for a second, close your eyes and imagine. What did medieval India actually sound like? Well, I can tell you it wasn't just one single monotonous voice. Not at all. It was this vibrant, bustling chorus of languages, each one telling its own unique story. So, let's tune in and have a listen.
All right, here's our roadmap for this journey. First, we'll set the scene by looking at what was basically a linguistic golden age. Then we're going to take a tour, listening to the voices of the north and then heading down to the Dravidian heartland. After that, we'll explore the incredible synthesis with Persian that created a whole new language. And finally, we'll wrap it all up by looking at the legacy this period left behind.
Okay, so our story really kicks off in what you can only call a golden age for language. Now, classical languages like Sanskrit were still a big deal, of course, but this was the era when the languages of the people, the regional tongues, really started to find their voice and just flourish.
The most important thing to get your head around about this period is that it wasn't about one language trying to dominate all the others. It was this incredibly dynamic place where lots of different languages grew right alongside each other, weaving this rich, beautiful linguistic tapestry that still defines India today. Let's start our tour up in North India, where the Indo-Aryan languages were starting to take the shape we recognize today. And to really get what's going on here, you first have to understand the two major language families that basically covered the entire subcontinent.
This right here, this lays out the fundamental linguistic map of India. It's super important. So on one hand, in the north, you've got the Indo-Aryan family, which grew out of classical languages like Sanskrit and Prakrit. But then you go south, and it's a whole different story. The Dravidian family has its own really ancient and totally independent roots. This north-south distinction, it's the key to understanding everything else.
So you might be asking, how does a modern language like Hindi just appear? Well, the short answer is it doesn't happen overnight. It's this gradual, fascinating evolution. You start with these common regional dialects, the Prakrits, which then morph into a form we call Apabhramsha. And it's from that base that you start to see distinct early forms of Hindi, like Brajbhasha and Awadhi, bubble up to the surface. And these are the very languages that poets would soon make famous.
Now these guys, they weren't just writers, they were cultural pioneers, absolute giants. See, during the Bhakti movement, saints like Tulsidas and Kabir did something revolutionary. They chose not to write in elite Sanskrit. Instead, they wrote in the everyday languages of the people, languages like Awadhi and Brajbhasha. And that decision, it didn't just make their message accessible to everyone, it lifted these regional tongues into powerful, beautiful literary languages.
Okay, let's pack our bags and head south. Down in the Dravidian heartland, an equally vibrant but totally distinct literary tradition was absolutely thriving. And a lot of the time, it was being fueled by some serious support from powerful royal dynasties.
The patronage from southern courts, like the Chola and Vijayanagara empires, was just immense. This support was the engine driving the creation of these monumental works. You have epic literature like Kamban's Ramayanam in Tamil, these deeply philosophical verses called vachanas in Kannada, and foundational texts like the Mahabharatam in Telugu. It was royal support that really supercharged the growth of these amazing languages.
And what were all these incredible works about? Well, the focus was squarely on things like moral values, social life, and deep devotion. These weren't just stories to pass the time, they were basically cultural and ethical blueprints for society. And believe me, their influence is still felt so deeply across the region today.
And now we come to a really pivotal moment in our story. A completely new linguistic influence arrives on the scene, with the Delhi Sultanate and then the Mughals. But this wasn't about replacement, oh no. This was the start of something remarkable, a synthesis.
So, with the arrival of the Delhi Sultanate and later the Mughals, Persian becomes the official language of the court, of administration. But here's the crucial part. It didn't just come in and wipe out the local languages. Instead, it started to mix with them. Indian tongues began borrowing Persian words, and this didn't just enrich their vocabularies, it created entirely new ways of speaking and writing.
And the ultimate result of all this incredible mixing? Well, you get the birth of a brand new language, Urdu. It is the perfect example of India's composite culture. You take the grammatical skeleton from local Hindi dialects, but you flesh it out with this incredibly rich vocabulary from Persian and Arabic. And from that amazing fusion, a uniquely beautiful and powerful language was born.
Wow! We've journeyed across the entire subcontinent and through centuries of linguistic change. So now, let's bring it all home and really nail down the key takeaways from this incredible golden age of language.
All right, if you're taking notes for an exam or just want to lock in the main points, this is your slide. Let's run through the 5 things you absolutely have to remember. First, this was about evolution, not replacement. Second, India has 2 major language families, Indo-Aryan up north, Dravidian down south. Third, the Bhakti poets were the champions who elevated the local languages. Fourth, the great synthesis with Persian gave us the beautiful language of Urdu. And finally, all of this came together to create that unity and diversity that is still India's cultural hallmark.
And that, right there, is why this whole story matters so much. This isn't just dusty, ancient history. The choices made by those poets, the support of kings, the cultural mixing that happened in those medieval cities, all of it directly created the voices and dialects spoken by over 1 billion people right now. It is a living, breathing legacy that shapes how people connect and who they are every single day.